The U.S. Congress last extended AGOA in 2015 by 10 years, authorizing the program to 2025. It does not seem, though, that African countries will get their way this time for a 10 or 20-year extension. Business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo is at Nasrec Center, where the AGOA summit is currently taking place. On Ntokozo, we've also been hearing mixed reaction from some pundits who say, well, it might not necessarily be a bad thing if, for instance, South Africa in particular is excluded from AGOA, and others saying, well, we need it.
Good afternoon, Dudu. Indeed, that is the debate that continues. And on day one, we did hear that, regardless of that 10 to 20-year extension, some African countries calling at least for a 3-year review to just see if we can be extended. And the argument there is that a level of certainty is needed. And I am now joined by the Minister in the Presidency, and that's Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, for a little bit more detail. Thank you for talking to us. Now, calls from South Africa and other African countries has been a 10 to 20-year extension. But it's looked like it's shaky that we might get that. Talk us through why it's important to just have a longer duration. And we did see that with former President Obama extending that. So
I think for us, the 10-year extension or 20-year extension, what the president called the long-haul extension, it gives certainties to investors. For instance, if you're going to invest if you're going to extend for 3 years, what does that mean for an investor who has to put up a beneficiation plant to manufacture lithium batteries in Zambia or in Zimbabwe or in DRC? It doesn't mean anything, because by the 3 years it will be the construction of the factory itself. By the time you finish, you won't benefit from the AGOA because it will be done there for it. The shorter extension detracts from the value of the investments. And with the need to diversify the African economies, and us as Africans saying, which the president articulated very clearly, to say we are no longer going to be the exporters of our raw minerals, but we are going to be the exporters. In fact, he calls them, we're no longer going to be the exporters of stones and rocks. We're going to be the exporters of finished goods. That means we need factories built here, and it takes time to build a factory, and it takes time for a business to take up. So a 10-year extension is a solid argument for any business case, and the private sector has supported government or the African ministers in terms of that call to say, and the civil society to say, let's have a 10-year or a longer. Civil society have called for a 20-year extension. That's one. But secondly, if the relationship between the U.S. and Africa has to stabilize, it cannot stabilize on the short term. You need a medium to long-term range. And 3 years is not a long-term range, it's a short-term range. It must come in larger, it must give us that range. But thirdly, when you are dealing in an environment wherein we have options, and you say you want to only review and decide on AGOA in 2025, what should happen between now and 2025? The African countries will be bound through the FCTA to look for alternative investors. So it's also in the interest of the U.S. government to make a decision quicker, before 2025, which is the due date for the decision to review and extend, and also to take a decision and say we are committed to a relationship with the African countries, and that extension we're going to make it longer, but also make it open, eligible for other countries to participate. Yes, there have been discussions on what are the conditions of participation, but those can be sorted. But what's important is that it must be reviewed urgently, and it must be for a longer period.
And that links not to the enhancement of the benefits of AGOA, making sure that we add more sectors and so on. How would that then, having the longer extension, enable the country and the continent to actually enhance what they get out of AGOA even further?
So if the AGOA enhancement does not take place, if there's no review of participating products into the AGOA scheme, the U.S. is going to be the biggest losers. Because, for instance, the largest exports is crude oil that comes out of Africa, and I think you've got problems with steel. You've got also fabrics, and that also go out. But when Africans are saying we're no longer going to be exporting crude oil, we're going to be exporting refined products, what's going to happen? To me, we'll find alternative markets. And who's going to lose? It's going to be the U.S. And it will then have a bearing on what is the impact of the U.S. in the African continent and what is the relationship. So the extension and the enhancement of AGOA It's in the best interest of both African countries participating and also the US, but also the expansion to include other countries. It will also be beneficial to the US-Africa relations.
And just going forward, Minister, the geopolitical tensions, it's obviously going to be a question, and now we have a new crisis that's coming up that seems where the US and South Africa are on different ends of the totem pole. How are we working then around those issues to ensure that South Africa, in the long haul, we are remaining in benefiting from AGOA?
I do not know why when we hold as a sovereign state a view of our own which differs from the US, we want to bring AGOA into place. Both countries understand that we are different people, we are different countries, we are sovereign, we hold our own views, and we explain our own views because there is reasons why we push particular views and articulate particular views. And that has not broken relations. We have clarified ourselves. I was part of the delegation to the US, and there was clear reception of our message and our position as South Africa, because we are an independent. And I give an example, like in a family, it doesn't mean the father and mother or husband and wife don't always agree. But it doesn't mean at night they don't go to the same bedroom. It doesn't mean tomorrow they're not going to be discussing the welfare of their mutual children. It doesn't mean they're not going to be discussing the future of their family or their families. So that's the nature of the business. It's a beast. So you must take the geopolitics as tensions in the household. And where we have differences, we explain each other's position, we understand, we respect each other, and it doesn't threaten the other relationship. It doesn't mean when a mother and a father are differing about the type of school a child must go to, tomorrow there's going to be a divorce.
Thank you so much for talking to us. And of course, that is the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, saying that it doesn't mean if the parents are arguing in the home that they won't do the right thing for their family, just describing those relations between South Africa and US when it comes to South Africa being able to continue to benefit from AGOA and strengthen their relationship with the United States. It's back to you in studio for now, Tutu.
Thank you very much, Ntokozo Khumalo, our business reporter, for that update from the AGOA summit.